Prison/jail guards of Reddit. What's the weirdest stuff you've seen while walking past a cell on your patrol? I work in a juvenile detention facility. We had to put a kid in a secure room, think padded walls with a camera, because he was self-harming. When you do that, you remove everything they can self-harm with, so like no pencils or shoelaces or whatever. Dude pulled his braces out of his mouth and started self-harming with the wires. Story 2. My sister is a prison nurse. I texted her this thread and asked what's her story, and her reply was this. The new trend at my prison is the dudes tie a string around their dongs and then attach it to their big toe going through their pants. Then when they're talking to myself or other female staff, they'll sit there and tap their foot to get off. I was told if I see anyone tapping their foot to ask them to pull their pant leg up and see if there's string. Who knows what they'll think of next? Look, it's gross, but it's clever. I gotta admit, I wouldn't think of this. Story 3. I was a correctional officer for 5 years. Spent some time working in ad seg. Got cut with a razor blade across the right hand and left wrist. 47 stitches worth. There was a guy there who could flayed himself. Just the sound was enough to turn my stomach. One kid had what he called a pillow escort. The most dangerous inmate wrote children's books. We had a serial murderer who only targeted rich gay men and was an expert martial artist. He could do splits all Van Damme style. Really interesting character and case. Story 4. Ex-CO in a medium security prison in Oklahoma. We had some real weirdos. The day-to-day grind felt like any other job. Most of the time it was pretty boring and I thought about quitting a lot. I got to know a couple of the inmates, which I regret very much looking back on it. There was a guy, let's call him Lewis, who caught his wife cheating and unalived her and the other guy. He didn't seem like the murderer type, and I always wrote him off as a guy who made one really bad mistake. So anyway, it's about 3 in the morning and I'm walking down the hall doing a head count. These are always eerily quiet, and the smallest sound in the old decrepit prison sent shivers down my spine. I heard the usual noises, coughing, ventilation fans running, the odd toilet flush. Yes, mattresses squeaking from people pleasuring themselves. I heard some pretty heavy mattress squeaking as I turned the corner to another hallway. As I approach, I realize it's coming from Lewis's cell. He just got a new cellmate and I expected to see this new guy wanking away in there while poor Lewis slept. That is definitely not what I saw. I shined the light in there and saw Lewis, butt naked on top of the new guy. I will never forget the way the hair on his butt all kind of pointed towards his crack. The new guy looked mortified, crying, slobbering, slime coming out of his nose, all of it. Lewis was doing butt stuff to the new guy big time. I took a mental note that both of them were indeed in their cell and went on with my night, trying to erase the mental picture. As I walked away, I heard Lewis whisper, "You like that, don't you?" A second or two of silence followed, and then I heard him speak again. "If you don't, you should have used a serious tag." OP, come on. I feel so cheated every time I read a story and it ends with this. Like, okay, you got me, you made the big funny on Reddit, whatever. Honestly, kind of weird material to use to make this kind of joke, though. Honestly, not a fan. Do better, OP. Story 5. Been a CO for 6 years at a fairly large jail. We currently house about 2,000 inmates. One of the weirdest non-butt stuff I've seen was one middle-aged man who believed he had an invisible dog named Jeff. This inmate would feed Jeff, walk Jeff around the unit with a collar or leash made of toilet paper and saran wrap, and play fetch with Jeff. One day I noticed toilet paper teepees in his cell and random places on the ground around the unit. He said he was just lazy that day and didn't want to pick up Jeff's droppings. Also, it is extremely unsettling to walk by a cell and watch a man crap in his own hand and then take a bite out of said crap, like he was eating a Snickers bar. Story 6. Not a CO, but was in prison for 6 months. Dude got into a fight over spades. They were gambling 5 ramen noodles a game. Well, this black dude, Jay, was down 60, and this white guy, Terry, called his debt. Well, Jay told him to get it off the roof, basically screw off. Terry was always getting into fights and was basically a lunatic. He'd always yell at people and never really got physical with it, though. Well, a few nights after the soup debacle went down, the whole pod was alerted by a loud frickin' yell from Jay. He'd been sliced with a razor blade. You're probably thinking, normal prison BS. Nope. Terry was incarcerated for giving a minor HIV. Terry had cut himself with said razor blade and then sliced Jay with it. He gave someone HIV over $20 in commissary. Essentially, the whole pod came to Jay's rescue, and Terry no longer looked like a person. Apparently, Terry got a life sentence on top of the 10 years he already had left, and Jay is now infected with HIV. There's a bunch of other stories from my 6-month stay, but that was the craziest of the crazy. That is a truly evil way to get back at someone. Over $20 in ramen noodles. It's scary what an unhinged human can do, huh? Story 7. I worked at a maximum security prison. It was right before Christmas, and this guy made a Christmas tree complete with a revolving train, all from paper, and string and scraps of his mattress cover. The conical frame of the tree was suspended with string that he'd attached to his tree's light fixture. He used the scraps of his mattress cover, which was green, to serve as the tree's needles. The mind-blowing part was this. He created a wind turbine that was powered by his air vent on a wall near the ceiling. The turbine, complete with functioning gears that he made out of paper, turned a shaft that served as the trunk of the tree. At the base, the shaft revolved and was attached to origami boxcars that circled the tree. At first glance, I didn't understand what it was until another officer who regularly worked the unit came by when he saw my look of awe and confusion. He was allowed to keep it for a while, but was eventually required to take it down. I think he got a write-up or sanctions for destroying his mattress. It was incredible. Another guy painted an incredible picture of an angel on the wall of his cell, complete with a full scripture verse, with feces. That first guy definitely has a bit of a brilliant mind to be able to pull that off in prison. It makes me wonder what happened to get him there. It's maximum security though, so I can't imagine it would be too light. Even the most brilliant brains can have some screws loose or do things wrong. Story 8. I was a detention officer for 6 years. One guy covered his entire cell walls in solitary with scriptures using his crap. We called him Holy Crap. There are so many stories. I saw a guy beat another male in his tank top with a mop bucket. Dude had a multitude of stitches. The best one was this time a young frequent flyer came in and was very jittery. I asked if she had anything and she denied. I informed her if she got past the intake process and was caught with anything, she would be charged with a felony 2 instead of a typical 3 due to it being inside the facility. She confessed the drugs were inside her kitty. So I take her to a private cell and ask her to remove them. She pulls out 5 caps to needles. The 5 needles were left inside of her uncapped. I looked at the other female guard and said, "Dude, it's about to get messy." Long story short though, the inmate was able to retrieve them all without injury by pure luck. Honestly, that's really generous of OP to be like, hey, just so you know, it's way worse to get caught inside with it, so you might as well fess up now. It sounds like OP was a rare detention officer who actually wanted the inmates to, get better in some ways, and not just be punished. More so on what actually happened though. Yikes. Needles in there? Why would you? Oh, no. Story 9. I work at a level 5 supermax prison in a small southwestern Virginia town. And we had this guy. He kept getting his butt kicked, and normally we kind of know why it's happening, but in this case, we didn't. Come to find out, other inmates thought he had drugs. One day we caught him with white-looking powder on his nose, so we had to take him out and drug test him and cavity search him as well. This happened 4 or 5 times over the course of 5 months, and he passed every test and search every time. Well, one day we caught him. This guy was pleasuring himself to completion, letting his nut dry, crushing it, and snorting it. Good times. Story 10. I was a CO for a pre-release center that had a dorm-style facility. During a normal security check, I was walking through the bathroom and just happened to see something large and odd sitting on the ground beside an inmate's feet, behind a stall door. Yes, the inmate's bathroom actually had stalls with doors. Well, I opened the door and the inmate was just sitting on the toilet, not doing anything at all while holding a honey bun. The thing on the ground by his feet? A giant 5-pound block of butter. A lot of other crazy stuff happened, like catching an escort in the dorm, 3 escapes in one day, etc. But the butter story has always stuck with me. Story 11. I used to work 3rd shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. at a prison in Oklahoma, usually in the same place, until this happened. We had to do a count every hour on the hour. There was a guy in Bravo Pod that would always ask me how I was doing. Never thought anything of it. During my 2 a.m. count, I get to his cell and he's standing at the door holding a piece of paper against the glass. It says, "Can I show you something? If yes, come back after count. If not, have a good night." So I loudly ask, "What the hell do you want to show me?" He starts shaking his head and puts his finger to his lip, shushing me. I say whatever and continue my count. After finishing the top rung, I have to walk past the cell anyway since it's at the bottom of the stairs. I shine my flashlight in his cell and again loudly ask what he wanted. He proceeded to pull out his dong and started pleasuring himself to me. Always the romantic type with these, huh? Definitely a stunning specimen of a bachelor. Story 12. My old martial arts teacher was a prison guard for years. These are his stories. The poop guy. One guy was just a depraved psycho who liked to smear crap all over himself and mock the guards because no one wanted to go in there and grab him and throw him in the shower. Instead, they got a powerful fire hose and blasted him and everything in his cell clean. Seemed to work quite well. Fork dong. He liked to put forks down his dong. The golden. Staph, that is. He was infected and he knew it. He used it as a weapon by constantly cutting himself and trying to smear people with his blood around the eyes and mouth. Let's just say the cameras were pushed aside a few times from his cell. The Nutball. This was a 5-foot Weasley guy on hard drugs. 10 guards could not take him down. There is footage of this tiny guy surrounded by guards, rolling around, and he's still in a boxing stance bouncing on the spot, blood dripping down his face. Story 13. I worked in the county jails for the first 4 years of my career. We had a horseshoe-shaped hallway with 5 or 6 safety cells. These cells are used for inmates who want to self-unalive or are a danger to themselves. The walls are padded but still fairly hard, and the inmate's clothing is removed and replaced with a heavy garment they cannot make into a noose. Checks are conducted every 15 minutes for obvious reasons. One day, I had an inmate who had that wide-eyed, 1,000-yard stare with a very unsettling smile on his face most of the time. During one of my checks, I offered him a styrofoam container with some bread and cold cuts. He hadn't been eating, so I was happy to see him take it. He opened the container, removed the bread, and stared at me through the glass from about a foot away. I saw him reach his hand behind his nude body and watched his face strain a bit. When he brought his hand back up, he was holding mushy crap which he smeared on the bread and then pressed the 2 slices together. While continuing to stare into my eyes and smile, he took a huge bite from his homemade crap sandwich. I was in disbelief and walked away halfway gagging. When I returned a few minutes later with more deputies, the sandwich was gone and he was licking his fingers. Story 14. My CO friend told me the story of Battleship Guy. So one day when he was booking in new inmates, he was giving them a physical inspection to note any problems. He realized the guy had tied a string around the base of his dong and the shaft was really lumpy. After asking the guy about it, he sent him to medical to get it sorted out. After questioning, the inmate admitted to stealing ceramic pieces of the board game Battleship while at his last prison. He would then use one of the blades from his razor to cut open his dong and insert the pieces under the skin of his dong and waited for it to heal. In all, Battleship Guy had 14 pieces under the skin of his dong. Not just the small ships, he had the large ships in there too. Well, this is just utterly disturbing. Oh dear. Also just kind of really sad, because I know that that man is not going to get the mental help he needs inside of prison. At all. In fact, there aren't many places on Earth that could give him the help he needs there, which means he's just screwed up for his life, I guess? That sucks to even think about. Story 15. I just asked my former roommate and this is what he said. Dude was in a holding cell, padded. He saw angels and stuff. Proceeded to tear open his own balls and chewed on them. He then lit them on fire with batteries he had smuggled up his butt. He says he wants to quit. Edit. Some more, less dark stories. Dude is out on the recreational yard, right? He has a necklace made of chicken bones, sewn together. So we're like, what the hell? A few of us approach this obviously crazy man and ask, what's up with the chicken bones? He says they're part of his religion. They're allowed to have religious items. We ask, what religion? And he says, sorcery. We quietly chuckle when he throws himself to the ground and starts screaming, sorcery! So we subdue the guy and we ask him, dude, are you alright? He goes, yeah man, it's my religion, sorcery. I don't know, I thought that was funny. Another time, I was searching a guy's cell with another CO. We pull out a welding gun, homemade, and a lock in a sock, a homemade flail, as well as a bunch of other stuff. We were locking him up when I found a bowl full of square cutouts of people's faces from magazines and stuff. Chess pieces, numbers, card symbols, all written in squares. I asked him what all this stuff was for. He was a young guy too. He looks at me and says, man, that's for my Dungeons & Dragons game. Story 16. 1. I saw a man start biting veins out of his own arm. 2. I saw a guy get stabbed through the head, then in the back and out the chest. 3. Hand meat pushed through the holes of canvas work gloves. It was from getting a hand stuck in a license plate press. It looked like the spaghetti Play-Doh extruder. 4. A guy jump with a noose around his neck. 5. Watched a suspect stab a guy in the back. Survived. It hit the heart but didn't puncture. Then, when I was searching him, he pulled heroin out of his butt and ate it. 6. Saw a parolee try to break in. 7. 2 inmates were discovered with a VCR and VHS contraband in their cell. We watched it and discovered they had used the education department's video production gear to make a gay film. Don't do this job no matter how well it pays. You become a slave to your pension. The rate of PTSD is something like 30%. I have personally known 8 COs that have unalived themselves in 8 years. The divorce rate is also crazy. I just talked with Mr. Headstabber for the first time since I witnessed him do it about 7 years ago. I was scared but had to pretend to be calm and have a convo with him about the murder. I then came home and have to act like everything is fine with me. Honestly, 30% is surprisingly low. This sounds like an incredibly traumatizing job. Just a high-stress environment all the time with some of the most unstable and dangerous people like, in your general area. Definitely not a job I would ever try to get. Admittedly, they wouldn't want me anyway. I wouldn't be able to stop anyone from doing anything. Story 17. My mom was a nurse at one of our state's roughest psychiatric wards, the place where jails send the craziest of murderers, assaulters, and child touchers to have them evaluated under lockdown. She's told me a whole bunch of crazy stories, but the one that's craziest to me is the one that actually happened to her. She was the kindest of the medical staff. She knew how to read people and was very patient with them in order to gain their trust. A lot of the toughest guys to come through those doors would calm right down when they saw her coming, because they felt like she was their friend. If that wasn't the reason, the fact that she carried a ridiculously long needle to jab in their butt might have helped too. One night, one of the most feared patients who unalived his whole family was acting like a psycho in my mom's unit. Someone sounded the alarm. All of the guards and therapy aides came running along with my mom. This guy was freakishly large. It would have taken the entire staff on hand to tie him down. They let my mom do the talking to try and cool down the situation. Normally, the guy really respected my mom, and she was always the best person to diffuse issues. Turns out that night, he was truly freaking out. In the midst of his episode, my mom told him, "Listen, you're gonna have to calm down because now that everyone is here, they're not going to leave unless you're cooperating, or in restraints." He responded, "Well then put me in restraints, you coward. I'd like to see you try it." This was very unlike him. She tried one more time. "Charlie, I mean it, work with me here. I don't want to use this needle, and I don't want to see them handle you that way." He says, "Say one more word and I'm gonna knock your butt out." She wasn't particularly threatened because people talk to her like that all the time. At the start of her next sentence, he uppercut her so hard that she woke up in the hospital. The unexpected jolt did a number on her jaw and face, but the worst part is that it broke her neck. Yes, she survived, but after 11 months of recovery, the board determined that she was not allowed to return back to work again due to her weakened and high-risk state. I would just like to come in here for a second and say that OP's mother is an absolute saint of a person and did not deserve that uppercut whatsoever. It sounds like she has the most patient heart and soul I've ever heard of. Definitely need more people like OP's mom, which usually people say to mean a different thing. Anyway, that was kind of uplifting despite how horribly it ended, so moving on anyway. Story 18. I was an officer for 5 years. One incident happened while I was walking the top tier at High Desert State Prison. While I went from Pod A to Pod B from the middle doors, all the white inmates at the tables on the bottom tier just started giggling as I approached one of the cells. In my head, I was wondering why the hell they're giggling like little girls. Then as I passed the cell and looked in, I saw one guy sitting next to another guy with his arm around him. He was giving him a handy. The bottom tier exploded with laughter. Story 19. I was a CO in a maximum security prison for around 2 years. Saw a lot of really weird things. The one that stuck with me the most was watching a small white man who was covered in tattoos eating a mini cupcake out of a huge black inmate's butthole. The little white guy was a white supremacist and it was entirely consensual, although I still took both of them to the segregation unit. The weirdest one I didn't experience firsthand, but the other shift told me all about. A man had stuck the pointy end of a spork down his pee hole and had to be taken to medical. When the doctor removed it, he got agitated, and this time stuck staples into the spork so that when they tried to remove it, the second time it would catch like a fishhook. They had to take him to the emergency room at a nearby hospital and fillet the man's dong open to remove it. The third time, a few weeks later, he just cut what was left of his mangled dong. The rest is mostly just butt stuff. Maybe I take all this a little too seriously, but these weird stories have mostly just been sad to me. Just a lot of people with severe mental health problems and no real reason to get better because they're locked up anyway. So they're just stuck in this endless cycle of getting worse and worse mentally. And this is what happens. There were a few funny ones in here and even a couple uplifting ones, or at least that one. But mostly just kind of, I don't know, depressing. At the very least, I hope you were entertained by this video, whatever that means for you. And I also hope that you have a wonderful day or night. I'll see you in the next one.